Okay, so today, much better weather, nice and sunny outside, and hopefully I won't be as close to the camera with this one. I noticed I was working real close yesterday. Sorry about that. It's I think right there is where it's in focus. Okay. Now I'm crossing my fingers with this one and hope I don't break it. It's very delicate. The material is. I think I'm going to use some percussion on it here in a minute. Because percussion is my favorite technique for thinning. I know it can be thinned with pressure too, but I don't use really big ishi sticks or large pressure flakers or a slotted pad. A slotted pad allows flakes to travel easier than a pad like this. If there's a lot of pressure on the pad, it tends to stop the flakes from running a long way when using pressure. Short flakes are fine. Okay, I got my glasses on now. Okay, so I'm going to try to remove this mass here and here. And then try to remove some of this and try to flatten out everything. Then thin down the base really thin, or as thin as I can get it. Do the notching and then finish the blade. Okay, so I'm going to go kind of slow on this. Because I'm going to pause and try to show you the flakes as they come off. This is a very soft sandstone. Different stones have a little bit of a different effect on the edges when you braid. This is a very gentle abrading. If I want to use a harsh abrader, I just use the quartzite. Still takes a while compared to the modern abrader. Okay. This is getting kind of worn down, but I'm just going to leave it rounded. It'd probably work a little bit better if I sanded this down a little bit sharper, but I'm just going to wing it. Use it as is. Now Yeah, the edge is a little bit too concave right here. Gotta beef that up. You know, knock it back some more or grind it down a little more. Because if it's too concave, it'll create step fractures. I think you'll see a couple good places to hit. Right here, just to start out. Again, I'm resting my hand on my knee to get just the right distance, and this elbow is resting on this other leg. You know, once I rest my arms, I can keep the same distance pretty easily to try to get an accurate strike. I took some of the tip off with that one. I'm not sure exactly why that is. The flake will travel in this direction and it'll wrap around. It'll wave up and then down, and that happens quite a bit with the tips. I don't know if you can see what I mean. It wanted to fan out, but since this is a weak area, I took advantage of that weak area and went that way as well. It went up over this little area and then back down through this area, took off the tip. When it actually looks like there's two flakes there, there's not two flakes. That's not a flake removal right there. Although it does look that way. The flake removal was here and it wrapped around and took off some of the tip. And that's not me judging it, that's me missing. I'm missing that platform. You know, some nappers, you'll see they'll try to judge the strikes and then they hit. I don't ever do that. I don't ever swing to test the distance. I just go ahead and try to hit it. I totally missed that one. Okay. It really doesn't do much good to thin this down when you lose the tip. because it winds up looking just as fat as it was before you started. So losing the tip, it's very important not to. Don't do like I'm doing. I'm going to switch to an indirect punch here in a minute. I really don't want to mess this up. I'd like to, get a lot of practice in on the freehand direct percussion, but I can do that off camera. I'm trying to get that little step fracture off without losing too much width. Anyway. I finally got it, but I ended up taking a bite out of the side there. Okay. So I'm going to use an indirect punch to thin this down. thought I had a piece of sandpaper here somewhere. Now I got to be careful with the angle at which I hold the piece this way. See, I can get an undercut, or I don't know what it's called, but see that step fracture right there? It's the flake trying to move in this direction to cut through the piece. And that's caused by an angle that's down like this. If I put the tip down too much in this case and strike it inward with the tip down, the flake, you know, that bulb of percussion travels in pretty much horizontally. Now if you tip it either way, it'll try to cut through the workpiece. You got to be very careful on how that bulb of percussion is initiating. If you tip it like this and it initiates, it could cut through the piece. So that's what that is. I have to be careful of those, especially with this heat treated material. I just wanted to bring that up. I mean, it's easy to remove that damage, you know. It's damage control is fairly simple on that, but that could lead to problems. Like if it's in there deep, I don't think it is, but if it was in there kind of deep and it had bitten into this edge a little bit, if I start hitting on the base, it could snap the whole point right through there, starting with that little initiation. Just a little side note. To me, that platform looks just right, but it's not. It's just not releasing. And what I'm going to do is try to creep up on that step fracture to get it to remove it. Yeah. See, it's already 21 minutes. This particular arrowhead is going to take me quite a bit of time, but I'll get it all on film. Hopefully you guys won't get too bored. So I'm going to take my time on this piece. I don't want to break it, and I want to go through every step and make sure that you can see everything. This stone is a little quirky because I can't really tell when the flakes are releasing. Usually I can tell, but for some reason with this particular stone it's hard to feel when they release. It sounds like they are, and sometimes they're not, and sometimes it doesn't sound like they release and they did. So I mean, it pressure flakes really well. I might just try to pressure flake, probably using this large pressure flaker here so I can get some leverage on it. So I'll use this elk percussion flaker for the pressure flaker, and I got to make sure I don't bridge it across. You know, I don't make sure I don't put pressure on that on the ends when I'm doing this. I'm going to use a lot of what I call passive pressure. That means I'll press on it and wait for the release instead of you know, adding a lot of force at the end trying to get it to pop off. I'm just going to press and wait until it releases. That usually drives a longer flake that way. Getting some glare. I'm just trying to get it symmetrical. That was a nice flake right there. Passive pressure. That one, the platform was too weak. Didn't go anywhere. Okay, it's 29 minutes, so almost 30 minutes, so I'll cut it off there and continue on the next video. Okay. Now at this point, one more thinning pass is going to make it pretty thin, so I think I'm going to do the remainder of the thinning on the base and start doing the notches. And then I'll thin out the blade. Not sure what happened there. Let's see where I am here with the preform. 1 3/4 by 1 inch. So I've got some room. Okay. Pressure was working pretty good, so I'll just continue with the pressure. To thin down the base. Make this a little more rigid by rolling it up tight. Okay. I'm going to try a little bit of smaller flaker here. See what that does. It's probably too early to go to this size. I'm just going to see what it does. Yeah. I'm going to concentrate with this one here. I really need to get that tip smaller. You can see how soft this sandstone is. I'm putting my hand on the inside of my leg and this one on the inside of this leg too. Now this is a pretty critical point in here because that step fracture there blocks a lot of attempts for thinning this way, and this step fracture here blocks a lot of attempts for thinning that way. So this could be an island really quick if I mess up. Let's say I take a flake from here into there and it steps right across here. That could become an island. Now with pressure, you don't need a really low platform. I mean, it can be actually pretty high, and it creates a different type of flaking. You know, lower platform like this is a lot better for percussion, even though it is a bit concave right in here. I would have to take this back to do percussion or pressure, but if I put the platform up high, sometimes it helps when you do it that way, because it creates more mass underneath the platform and you can press off hopefully a larger flake. So I might try that. So I brush downward like this, which raises that platform slightly, creates a lot of convexity underneath here. So I'm going to try a very hard pressure flake and try to drive it in this area, try to create a wide flake that takes away most of this stuff. And normally this kind of thing goes pretty fast, and I don't think about doing it. That was pretty good. Let's see. Yeah, it's responding pretty good to pressure. I'm putting a little bit more pressure down as I'm pushing in at the very end to try to get that to release. But that was a little bit too much. A little bit too much downward pressure there. And again, when you lose length, it just makes it seem as if it's just as fat as it was before you started. So that's kind of disappointing. I don't know about you guys, but for me, pressure is a lot more unpredictable than percussion. I know that probably doesn't make sense. You can control pressure a lot, but right when you don't need it to do something like that, it'll do it. If that makes any sense. So for me, pressure is more of a handy way to prepare edges for percussion. Although these pieces here, this Dolores type Arrowhead, had a lot of obvious pressure flaking done on it. But I'm going to go ahead and try to do as much percussion as I can and do minimal pressure. Because it's, for me, you know, it's just as thick as it was before, and I've lost some length. I mean, it still seems pretty fat. Now, if it was longer, proportionately, it wouldn't seem as fat. And a lot of you guys, 90% of my questions are how to thin down pieces like this. How do you thin it down? How do you get, you know, everyone can get to this stage, but how do you thin it down? And for me, usually it's just a question of being aggressive, or how aggressive I'm going to be with the percussion. Pressure really can't get me in a very thin state, because it requires so much strength in order to push on the edges. The workpiece has to be very strong in order to push on the edges. Now with percussion, if you do it properly, it doesn't shock the piece very much, and you can put a lot of force in a small area and it won't shock the piece. You're not loading up a lot of pressure on it, and you don't have a lot of pressure on after the release of the flake. It just kind of cracks through the edge without putting too much shock on everything else, just that one little area. Anyway, let's see. This is the critical stage right here, because it's very small. I need to thin it down very thin. And if I think about it too much, it won't happen. So let me just compare what I've got so far and the thinness of some of these. Even the thick one here, mine's still pretty thick in comparison. Still got a lot of room to play with on most of them. You know, if I wanted to make something like that, or one of these, well, maybe not that one. I still could do that one too. But this is the critical stage here. To get it this thin, it takes a lot of practice. I might be able to get it this thin here with some lucky percussion flakes. Now this is the straight stem. I'm going to go for the expanded stem. Okay, so just to give you an idea of what the thinness needs to be, it's probably more like this one here. I'm still pretty thick on most of them, even this thick one here. So I'm at a critical stage here, and if I think about it a lot, it won't happen. So I just got to go ahead and try to thin this out without worrying too much. Without worrying too much about showing you the steps, every single little bit of every step. Okay, so I'm not getting the kind of release that I'm looking for on these flakes. Let me try one more time. What I was going to do is stop hitting and then start to prepare the edge in a different way, making it sharper. The problem with making it sharper is that it also makes it easier to crush. Now what I'm doing is I'm looking for areas that are not, they were not as dull as the areas I was having a hard time with. And I'm looking around for little micro spots that look not as dull as the spots I was having trouble with. And just hitting those, but hitting the ones that seem to be able to produce the longest flake, like where the most mass is. So I'll look around, and even though there might be a good spot, if it doesn't have a lot of mass, I'll skip it and go to the next, and look for areas that have a slightly weaker area than the areas that I was having trouble in. And once I stop finding those, then I'll go ahead and I'll re-chip the edge. Now I've got to get rid of this island in here, and to do that it's going to require a very good platform, and to make a good platform requires edge removal, and sometimes quite a bit of edge removal. So the trade-off here, or the thing to remember, is it's best to remove an edge that is already too wide. Like right here, it's a little bit too wide on the symmetry, so I can remove this edge without worrying too much if I prepare a platform. But is it advantageous for me to create a platform there? And it doesn't look like it. The better place for me to create a platform would be, here, remove some of this edge here. But then what I'm doing is I'm going to mess up my symmetry. But it looks like I'll have to do it. Sending in a flake from here through there this way doesn't seem as effective as coming over here on this side, sending a flake from over here, like right here through this way. I might have some luck with this flaker here. It's a piece of bone. It's kind of a chisel shape. This is more rounded on this end. See if I can drive some long flakes here. Yeah, it worked pretty good. Okay, so we're still at the preform stage, believe it or not, because I still haven't achieved the thinness that I want. So I'm going to cut it off there and continue in the next video. Okay, so My next step is to try to clear off some of these bad areas that'll end up as islands if I don't clear it off now. Now I don't want an edge that was as dull as before, but I don't want it too delicate either. I want to be able to send a wide flake into this area with percussion. Okay, so that worked pretty good. Now with that out of the way, I feel a lot better pressure flaking a lot of the rest of it. So I don't see areas that could present a hazard, you know, of creating an island. So that one worked pretty good. This large flake cleared off a lot. So now I'm very consistent in thickness. If I just run a bunch of pressure flakes, hopefully long pressure flakes, I'll be able to thin down that base. And I'll use that chisel shape piece of bone. There it is. I want to eliminate this here. So as I'm thinning, I'm also doing damage control on any step fractures I see. It didn't quite run as far as I wanted. Putting too much pressure never works good. Let's see. Alright, it's very steppy at this stage. To try to get it, the last bit of thinning done. But I think I can get a lot of that with pressure later on when I finish the blade. I'm going to go ahead and notch it right now. Maybe take a few more flakes off the base to get it thin in some areas and then start notching. I wanted to try to thin this little area out there, but I'll just go ahead and maybe I can blow through that with a notch. Anyway, the notch openings are pretty big, but I still need a narrower flaker than this. Let's see. Okay, I got one right here. Maybe this will work here. Let me I think I lost my place in the book. Yeah. Well, I'll just guess on the width of the base. When I do these critical notch flakes, I use passive pressure. I don't use the aggressive pressure. This is a pretty critical notch flake right here. So if I do it wrong, I could blow away a lot of this. I just want to make sure I thin it as I go in straight. Make the flake not too wide, not too narrow. Sometimes you pop off a flake and it's just a little narrow thing coming off, and it really doesn't thin it enough for you to go in there and turn that edge. So you can pop flakes off in the other direction. So you gotta lower the edge every time. That was pretty important too, because sometimes you can blow off this whole barb with these large punched out flakes. Now the neck has to be pretty thin, so I've got to be very careful. I think that's you know, I'm pushing it with that size of flake. I can't do too many of those. Because as I get closer to the neck, I can't be trying to pop off really large flakes. It'll snap the base off, or the stem. At the same time, I got to make sure I'm thin enough so I can get in there. You know, get in there far enough to make a narrow neck. And I'm pretty much just crunching the flakes off. There's not too much strategy. I'm just going to make sure I don't stall. And I've got to be kind of aggressive. I got to make sure I don't touch the sides here. Might even peel some of this off, just so I don't touch the sides, to make sure I don't touch. That was a pretty important flake, just like on the other side. At this stage, you know, I got to make sure I get it thin enough so I can proceed. But, you know, not pop off a flake that's so big that it'll knocks off the barb. And again, I've got to be aggressive so it doesn't stall. I took kind of a risk with that one. But it's pretty thick in that area, so I've got to really put some pressure. With practice, I could probably get the whole thing a lot thinner. And if I wasn't too worried about breaking it, I would have thinned it down a little bit more in the video. In this video. But I think you get the idea. Important thing is I can't, now that these barbs are delicate, I can't be pushing in the middle and having it across the pad like this, because it'll snap something off just by pressure. So I've got a domed pad around here somewhere. I'll get that out in a minute if I feel that I need to. But right now, as long as I have it up on the top of this roll, it should be okay. You know, and as long as I don't touch the tip and push up on it, it won't break the tip off. Now this is starting to stall, so I got to borrow from the stem here. Now, borrowing from the stem, you know, gives you a little bit of a weaker area going in. So when you do press off on the bottom of that notch, you can release a flake. I don't know if that made sense. I'm getting pretty close to stalling it because this is not narrow enough. Let me widen out this notch. you can see, but the flaker is getting rounded pretty fast. Let's see. So let me sharpen it. Get a little bit sharper so it's not just glancing off. It needs to grip on there. Let me see. I want to get my domed pad because I am going to put a lot of force on here and I don't want it to snap anything by bending. What I mean by that is I'm going to put a lot of force to get that little flake off there. There, you see that? That'll help me get the next one in the bottom of that notch. And by putting a lot of force in there, it helps me to not stall that, so I can drive it a little bit further and I should be done with the notches. It's still a bit wide and I'm kind of nervous about hitting the sides here. Because the antler grabs so well that any little grab on the edge will break off the barb. I don't know if that helped to, well yeah, I got some better clearance now. Okay. Just a little bit more. This edge up here is thicker. Let me take some more off. See, one side here, this side is a lot thinner than this side. And I'm worried about this thickness up on here. So I'm going to put a little bit of powder on there so I can get a better abrasive surface. Because, you know, just rubbing the antler on the stone will load up the stone and it'll get slick and you won't be able to take off any antler. Okay, I think that's good enough. Yeah. I just barely have enough clearance in there to feel comfortable. And when I go up on the top there, see, I barely have any clearance at all. Okay. I almost stalled it there. Maybe one more flake on this side. Yeah. Cool. I don't want to push it. I don't want to go any further. I'm going to compare it, see if I can find the place in the book. I think it's 264. No. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. 243, okay. Page 243. Notch depth looks okay. This one's deeper. Of course, the width on it is more. Let's see. I mean, the width of the notch opening, it's about the same. Except for on this side. Let's see here. It's about the same width. Okay, so all I need to do now is just go up on the edges and thin it down. Okay. Next video. Okay, so I don't know how long it's taken me so far, but it's over an hour on this particular point. I may have just dropped it on the tip just then. I don't know. I'll go back and look and see if I knocked off the tip. Anyway, I'm going to dress up the edges. I just dropped this on my percussion mallet. Not too smart. Yeah, I think I broke it off. Oh well. If you watch my videos, that's the thing I hate the most, is losing some of the tip. Of all the things that could happen in napping, that losing the tip is what irritates me the most. Believe it or not. I don't know why that is. I've got two bone rods here. One seems to be harder than the other. This one seems to be a lot harder, more dense. So and it's starting to crush the edge, so I'm gonna use the one that's less hard. And I don't like using antler on the very, very tip, because antler grabs and just pulls the tip right off. I lose more tips with pressure flaking with antler than anything else. It's okay further down on the blade, but the very tip, I just can't seem to make antler work for me at the very, very tip. Okay, so in a lot of those pictures I saw the edge being, the edge is generally concave, so I get a lot of edge to remove there. So I'm going to keep that in mind if I need to build a platform. I got a lot of edge I can work with here. Silly dogs, no matter where I'm at, I can't escape them. Nice thinning flake there. I don't know if you can see. And what I'm doing here is I'm thinning and shaping. Getting some glare, but you can kind of see some of these thinning flakes. And as I need to remove some of the edge, I'll make a platform and take a thinning flake if I need to. And what I'm doing is this pad actually helps me to stabilize the tip because it digs in. It's actually digging into the pad. I'm loading up a little bit before that flake detaches. See, it's so it doesn't move back. It's digging into the leather. And what's cool about working on a leather pad like this is with the spring theory that I went over earlier, when you load up and you push down in, and then when it releases, this will spring back this way. It tends to help the flake travel better when this is springing back this way and this is going back down that way. And there's a diminishing of the energy. Now, if there's a really hard item back here and you take a flake off, it won't spring back like this. I don't know if that makes any sense, but if it's springing back this way and this is springing that way, both springs work together. It works a lot better than if you were to back it up against something really, really hard. I guess that's why rubber pads work pretty good. I don't use a rubber slotted pad, but I can see why they work good or work well. They provide that springiness. I better stop talking before I mess up here. I'm going to try the antler on some of this down lower on the blade. Now that I got the tip thinned down pretty good. No. Nice thinning flake there. Not too bad. I kind of like the bone better. Yeah, because this really, it really does grip really well. And I've got to push really hard or twist really hard to get it to stay still, which is not good when if I've got my fingers around the barbs down here. I don't want to be putting too much pressure on the barbs with my hands or fingers. I'm going to try to run a flake in through here to get rid of some of that lumpiness right in there. Right here. I know I'm going to lose some of that edge, but that's okay. It's got to be concave anyway. That barb ended up being really curved there. I was going to try to even it up by doing the same curve on this side, but I'm not going to. Okay, let's see how this works here. A lot of pressure. Worked pretty good actually. Let's try one more time. And one last time. Yeah, pretty good. Got a nice bold pattern there, except for that little steppy area. Everything else looks pretty good. I can't remember if they said these edges are serrated or not. But I'm just going to fix it up, make sure there's no dull areas, and call it good. Okay, so I think that's good enough. Some of these points had first stage shapes, and they just get more narrow with resharpening, so I'm going to call that a first stage. With no resharpening, that means the edge is not going to be, you know, concave. I think I might have lost just a tiny bit off that tip again. Anyway, looks pretty sharp. Alright. I'm just going to leave it like that and not mess with it. Let's see. 243, I think the page was. Yeah. Okay, so this is what I ended up with. Now, it's a little bit larger than a lot of these other ones, but I think what happens is they get resharpened and the edges become, you know, more concave. There's one over here that's pretty good size, so I'm within the range. Now this neck right here is very narrow. I probably need to make that neck a little more narrow, although this one up here has a fat neck. And I could make those barbs a little sharper. So let's see, 18 minutes. Let's see if I can do that. Make the neck just a little more narrow. I'm going to borrow from this side here. Since this is already narrowed in there, this is not as narrow. And then make the barbs a little sharper. Okay, I was able to get a lot of that step fracture off there. I think the more I mess with it, the less bold the flakes become, so I'm not going to do too much more. Okay, so that's good enough. The thinness, let's see, I'm going to cheat and compare it to the thickest one. I think that's in range. Kinda, sorta. Yeah. But it's not nearly as thin as this one here. So, yeah, with a little more practice and maybe even if I was to take off some of that, you know, remove some more of this edge and make a beefier edge and then drive some more thinning flakes, I could make it thinner, but that's good enough. Now on these, the surface on most of these has a lot of bold flaking. Not too many little minute flake removals. There's a lot there. I think that's resharpened. But this one you can see a lot of bold flakes. Same with this. I don't know if I've got a lot of bold flakes on that side. Mine's got a lot of little flake removals. So that's one thing I could change on it. You know, concentrate more on bold flake removals. There you go. And I'll half this in the next one of the upcoming videos, the next one probably. I don't think I'll work on another piece. I'm not going to work on another piece of rhyolite or quartzite. I'm just going to end the series here and just half this for the next video, and that'll be it. Okay. Alright, so I was doing some more research into this point style, and I noticed that in the video I notched this point from the base, when actually I should have notched in from the corners. As you can see, these are corner notched points. The barbs aren't as long as the base like mine. My barbs come down about the same level as the base, and these do not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove some of this material from the lower part of the barbs, and I'll see if I can also narrow this neck a little bit more. And I changed my notching tool. I'm going to see how this works. The other tool was just an antler tine with the tip thinned down quite a bit. It was a damaged antler tine that I thinned down, but this time I'm using a piece of split elk antler, and I'm going to see how this works. So the notches are not this low on the Dolores points, and the good thing is I had a lot of material to work with. You know, if I had notched these too high up, you can't add to the barb, but I can certainly take away. So it's kind of good that I started notching these this one from the base. And maybe they did also, and a lot of those points are just resharpened, but with a narrow neck like this point type has, I don't think very many were reused. They were probably broken right across the neck, if they were thin. Now, there's a couple of thick ones in there. Those won't break as easy at the neck, but the really thin ones will certainly break after being shot, even if they hit something soft. Oh, there you go. Shouldn't have been talking. Okay, by some miracle I found the little piece. I'm going to super glue it back on. It was actually 2 miracles, because I dropped it when I found it the first time, and then I had to look for it all over again. So let's see if I can get some glue on this. And this is just for demonstration purposes only, so I don't have any reservations about using glue. And you can see how easily that came off using antler. I always blame antler, but it doesn't happen as often with steel whenever I use steel. Now, I could shut the video off and hold this. I'll shut the video off and hold this until it dries. Okay, I'll be back. Alright, well, the super glue is taking way too long, so let me just finish the other side. put my glasses on, that would help. Okay. Alright. Well, I stalled it pretty good in there, but it doesn't matter too much. Alright, so what I'll do is I'll finish this up a little bit later. Yeah, anyway. I might use a different glue. That glue might be expired or whatever. I don't know why it's not working. I'm just going to sharpen the barb. So we'll match the other one a little bit better. Okay, so yeah, what I'll do is make another attempt at gluing this, see if I can get this hafted. Okay. Alright, so I think I got everything set up here. I went out and made a notch in the wood with the bandsaw. I tapered the the end down a little bit. I don't know if you can tell. I always taper the ends. Just a piece of sandpaper from a belt sander. And this is really the best sandpaper, I think, is because it has such a tough backing on it. It lasts a long time. Both the abrasive and the cloth itself. Anyway, it fits really tight, and I'm going to make another one with a little bit better base next time. I won't show it on camera. I might show it later when I send it off to someone. But as you can see, some of this base has little steps. When I was driving flakes this way, this base or the stem should be a lot thinner. It would make this joint a lot stronger. When it's thick like this, I've got to widen out the bottom of this notch quite a bit, and it just makes it weaker. Anyway, of course it fits better one way than the other. And the thing about not using any glue is that you've got to get that joint just right. Because if you don't, it won't spin right. You know, when you spin the shaft, that tip won't be stationary. But I think you know what I mean. When you spin this, that tip's got to stay still in one place. And it's hard to do it when you don't have glue in there that will hold it in place while you mess with it back and forth. And once it solidifies, it'll hold it in place really well when you do the wrapping with sinew. But in this case, there is no glue, so the fit has to be tight, and it's got to be accurate for the point to sit on there properly. Now, this wood can extend a little bit further up, but in all the points that I've seen so far, except for the Apache types, the Apache did leave some wood sticking up on both sides. Of all the other types I've seen, the bottom of the notches is very close to the top of the tip of the wood, so that the sinew would go over the top of the wood as well as around. I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, so I've got some water here and some hide glue just stuck to a stone. It's dry, but when you add some water, it'll get sticky. And that's the only glue I'm going to use, is to glue this sinew down at the end. So it's backstrap sinew. It's fairly long and easy to process. This one is a little bit greasy, so I use it for wraps and stuff. I wouldn't use it for a bowstring. It's a little bit greasy and slightly decayed. It still smells pretty fresh, but when I try to pull it apart, it pulls apart easily. It's actually still pretty tough, but I try to use the strongest sinew possible for bowstrings, and the secondary sinew for wrapping arrowheads and fletching and that sort of thing. I always test it ahead of time. It's just a little side note for making bowstrings. Okay, so I don't want it too thick because I don't want it to be really bulky at the tip. I want a nice smooth transition. I'm not going to soak it in here very long. Just dip it in, get it damp. Get a little bit of glue. think it's got enough glue on it. So I'm going to put it over the top of the wood there and just work my way down. Now the fit has to be really good. Not only so it's sitting in there tightly, but the width of the shaft has to be, I like it to be slightly smaller than the arrowhead base, so I know it's making good contact with the sinew. If the wood is wider than the stone, then I'm afraid that the stone would be rocking around inside the joint. But when you see a little bit of the stone sticking out, I feel a little more confident that it's going to be a solid connection. Okay, so I could always add a little bit more sinew. If I wanted to. To make sure it doesn't split on impact. But when you're using only sinew, I have a theory that that these arrowheads were probably used for warfare. Now it's just because, I mean, they say it was not used with glue because they found one example that wasn't glued down, but you know, I suppose there might have been other examples that were glued down that they didn't see, and those could have been used for hunting. But for warfare, if there's no glue on the arrowhead itself, that means once the sinew starts to soften up, that arrowhead's going to come out of the socket, which means that once it's in the wound and you try to pull the arrow out, the arrowhead will stay in the wound, especially with barbs like that. And also especially with such a narrow neck, if the breakage across the neck doesn't leave the arrowhead inside, then the sinew softening up and loosening up, allowing the arrowhead to slip out, will leave the arrowhead inside the wound. It's a pretty nasty situation. I wouldn't want to be hit with an arrow like this that almost guarantees the arrowhead to stay in the wound. And you don't need much glue to hold this sinew down. I just like it because if it gets humid, if it doesn't have any glue, extra glue, the sinew becomes unwrapped. It starts to unravel itself with a high humidity. So with the glue on it, it keeps it kind of sticky under high humidity conditions, and it won't unwrap as easy. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to piece this together and try to keep this particular arrowhead production in one video. I'm going to go back and from the very beginning of when this arrowhead was being made, splice all the pieces together so you can see a complete Dolores type arrowhead being made and then hafted. But that's it. I might have put a little bit, I could have wound a little more sinew up on the top there. So there'd be a little more sinew here on the transition area, but I think it's good.